Feldon was a practitioner of the Third Path, the way that was neither Urza nor Mishra, charting a new course between the two warring brothers and their technological miracles. Feldon was convinced magic could bring back his lost love, Loran. She will come back to me. But while his red magic of the mountains could summon fire and call lightning, it could not restore his lost Loran. He could not even keep the life within her as she lay dying. His magics had failed him, and he had failed his love. So he sought out other magics that might succeed where his had failed. The first he found was a hedge mage, long since mad. But his green magic of the forests only summoned the living, not the dead. The second Feldon came to was the sorceress of Ronom Lake. But her blue magic could only create illusions of Loran. The black mage of the swamps took from Feldon his cane as payment to bring Loran back from the dead. But only after payment rendered and incantations chanted did Feldon realize this black magic would only animate Loran's corpse. The final mage was a scholar of Samite, who taught Feldon that true resurrection was not possible, not even with magic, and that he could only summon a copy of his lost love. Feldon cast the spell, and before him stood Loran, or rather, her copy. "Why am I here?" she asked him. "So that I may say goodbye," he told her. "Goodbye," she replied. Feldon allowed the spell to cease. Loran's form quickly dissolved. All that was left was a knowing, soft smile. Then that was gone as well. Feldon of the Third Path is the epitome of a rarely seen aspect of red in magic. Passion and undying love. He's got one of the best storytelling through game mechanics in all of Magic. He can bring things back from the dead, but only as hollow artifact shells, and they never last. At least not without Sundial of the Infinite shenanigans, but we'll get to those in a minute. Feldon of the Third Path costs 1 and 2 red for a 2/3, and then for 2 and a red, you can tap him to create an artifact token copy of a creature in your graveyard. It gains haste, but you sacrifice it at the end of turn. As the commander of a mono-red deck, Feldon has a playstyle unlike any other. Mono-red reanimator with artifact flair, which is a restriction that breeds creativity. Feldon lends himself to a simple plan with a lot of subtlety. Fill our graveyard, reanimate sweet creatures, and squeeze every drop of value from them to batter our way to a win. The first thing we must address is ramp in red and draw to get our mana going and keep our hand full. While Feldon himself only requires 3 mana to function, we're going to want more to do multiple things a turn and eventually hard cast some of our big threats. Solemn Simulacrum is our go-to creature to abuse via reanimation, getting you a land upon entering the battlefield and a card when it dies. This is exactly what you need to power up in the early game. Burnished Heart can be sacrificed to get 2 lands on the battlefield, and Feldon lets you rinse and repeat each turn until you're satisfied. There's not much in the way of creatures beyond that in mono-red, so we'll lean heavily on artifact ramp. Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, Thran Dynamo, and Gilded Lotus are just a few for starters. Even better, we can steal sweet mana rocks from our opponents by cheating out Hellkite Tyrant with Feldon. Being monocolored gives us the option to also run Caged Sun, which will give your creatures a boost while doubling your mana. Gauntlet of Power is similar, though it applies to everyone's mountains, which may not be what you want. What I prefer is running Extraplanar Lens, which forces you to exile a land and also has a global effect. Although there is a trick here. If you run snow-covered mountains, you can name them. And then there's a very good chance you'll have the mana doubling all to yourself, unless someone else is being sneaky with those Ice Age lands. Annoyingly, snow-covered mountains are useful in other formats, so they're not as cheap as you'd hope. Hopefully, we go to the Viking Plain soon and get some snow-covered lands again. Meteor Golem is fantastic to make a token of. A 3/3 artifact creature, when Meteor Golem enters the battlefield, destroy target non-land permanent an opponent controls. Itali, Primal Storm, is a legendary dinosaur, and whenever it attacks, we exile the top card of each player's library, and then we can cast any number of non-land cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. In a big commander game, that's big power. Pilgrim's Eye doesn't quite ramp us, but it gives us a lot of lands in hand. Making tokens of this can help filter out our deck by bringing a basic land card from our library to hand each token turn. Combustible Gearhulk is probably at its best in this deck. With Politics, you can probably get some opponents to let you draw the 3 cards each time you create a token. Hoarding Dragon lets you tutor an artifact into exile on entering the battlefield, and then gets it into your hand upon death. When you create a token with Feldon, you get both effects in a single turn repeatedly. Similarly, creating a short-lived token of Clone Shell lets you put a creature from the top 4 cards of your library directly into play. Now, attacking people with oversized tokens is not a great way to make friends, so it would be great if we could get ourselves some permanent blockers, and Mirror Battlesphere does just that. When we reanimate it, we don't get to keep the Battlesphere itself past the end of turn, but the tokens it produces are here to stay. You can build up a mere army over the course of a few turns, and then start using the Battlesphere ability to smash in while dealing a big chunk of damage. Wormcoil Engine is also great. You can smash your expendable 6/6 lifelink Death Touch token into people, and then you're left to keep the individual lifelink and Death Touch tokens. Siege Gang Commander spews out goblins and can even sacrifice them for damage if that becomes useful, while Pia and Kiran Nalar give you some chump-blocking Thopters for any flyers your opponents may have. Utvara Hellkite creates a dragon whenever a dragon attacks, which can get out of hand quickly if left unanswered. But all this token making feels suspiciously like planning ahead. We're mono red, we want to smash face now. Spite Bellows deals 6 damage to a creature when it enters the battlefield, and you can evoke it to get it into your graveyard immediately. Then Feldon can make a token to nuke a creature, and you have a ball lightning to send at someone. Inferno Titan is similar, getting to bolt something on entering the battlefield and attacking when you make a token. Bogard and Hellkite and Spawn of Thraxus are dragons that smash for a bit extra when they enter the battlefield, while Balefire Dragon and Steel Hellkite let you mess with an opponent's board if they connect. Zealous Conscripts and Molten Primordial are mini insurrections that you can play every turn. Duplicant flat out exiles something, which is a rare ability in mono red. Keldon Firebombers won't make you any friends since it forces your opponents to sack down to 3 lands, but it conveniently leaves you with just enough mana to use Feldon's ability to fling giant tokens around. The Annihilator mechanic from Zendikar is also quite mean when you're doing it early, and unsurprisingly, the original Eldrazi Titans have a clause to stop them sticking around in your graveyard. So your best options here are Pathraiser of Ulamog for near unblockability, and It That Betrays to steal the stuff you're making your opponents sacrifice. Imagine attacking with one of those on turn 4. Being in mono red gives us some excellent options for compounding the damage we're doing. Gratuitous Violence just flat out doubles it, while Warstrom Surge gives us an extra smash when we create a big token. Perforos, God of the Forge, won't be as explosive here as he is in a dedicated deck, but he provides a steady stream of damage to all opponents as we go about our business. Now then, in order to use Feldon's ability at all, we need to get some creatures into our graveyard. Spells like Faithless Looting, Tormenting Voice, Wild Guess, and Hug Your Mom are straightforward ways to craft our hand in the early game. If you want this as a creature effect, Goblin Rummager and Mad Prophet Rummage, while Deal Broker is a random colorless looter with some irrelevant conspiracy text that does nothing in Commander. Burning Inquiry is a fun little disruptive version if you want to annoy your opponents, and of course wheel effects such as the now pricey, it seems, Wheel of Fortune, Wheel of Fate, and Reforge the Soul are effective at filling up our graveyard and disrupting our opponent's hands. Magus of the Wheel works great with Feldon, since you can play it, sacrifice it to the wheel, and then use Feldon to create a hasty token to repeat the effect whenever you want. So we've got these artifact creature tokens that we're creating each turn, and we have to sacrifice them at the end of turn if they don't die in combat. Can we get some value out of them instead? Altar of Dementia lets us sacrifice the tokens to mill ourselves, while Bosch Iron Golem lets us sacrifice them to deal further damage to an opponent. Duretti Scrap Savant, a popular commander in his own right, is an incredibly useful toolbox for us here. His plus filters and fills up our graveyard, but then his minus lets us swap out short-lived tokens for any real artifact that's ended up in our graveyard. Goblin Welder does the same thing, and if you use Feldon's ability to create a Goblin Welder token, it can sacrifice itself to get something like a Wormcoil Engine onto the battlefield. Trading Post does a bunch of things we want here, letting us discard and get some incidental life gain, or sacrificing our artifact creature tokens for card advantage, either from our graveyard or our library. Activating Feldon's once per turn is great value in the early game, but later on we need more if we're going to keep up with our opponents. Illusionist's Bracers and Rings of Bright Earth let us copy Feldon's ability to get 2 tokens, which can be the same or different creatures. Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker is a second Feldon that makes copies of creatures on the battlefield rather than the graveyard, so you can double up on your tokens that way. Thousand Year Elixir, Mage Right Stone, and Puppet Strings all let us pay to untap Feldon and use his ability again. Sundial of the Infinite is a cheeky way for us to keep our tokens forever by ending the turn before we're forced to sack them. Yes, this really works. End the turn before the turn ends and keep your Feldon tokens. Thornbite Staff does a few things, but the only one we care about is that it untaps the equipped creature when a creature dies. We probably won't be able to use this for multiple activations per turn, but it does let us untap Feldon for use on defense. It's worth mentioning that with Kiki-Jiki and Zealous Conscripts, we have an infinite combo in our deck. Use Kiki-Jiki to copy the conscripts, then new token untaps Kiki, and you repeat. With both cards in our graveyard, Feldon on the field, and 6 mana, we can pull this off in one go. Use Feldon to make a conscript token, have it untap Feldon, use Feldon to make a Kiki-Jiki token, then we're off to the races. So what about our land base? One of the benefits of being monocolored is that you can get away with just running mountains. In fact, you can even bring in Blood Moon if you want to mess with fancier decks. In terms of utility lands, Gyre Reach Sanitarium lets you dump mana into some card filtering when you've got nothing better to do. Great Furnace is an artifact which will occasionally be useful. We can also throw in Valakut the Molten Pinnacle as a low opportunity cost way to get lightning bolts when we play lands in the late game. We won't ever be able to abuse it like modern decks do, but it's still good value. Flamekin Village and Hanwire Battlements let us give things haste when we need it. Feldon is actually part of a trifecta of mono-red commanders that all operate in a similar wavelength. Those other commanders for your interest are of course Duretti and Slowbad, but I feel out of the 3, Feldon is the commander for me. First of all, Feldon is going to be happy to run both Duretti and Slowbad, whereas the other 2 don't necessarily have much to do with each other. Feldon also creates for me one of the perfect commander decks. It isn't an overpowered winning on turn 3 combo deck, it isn't Misery Incarnate to play against or to play with, it doesn't have a linear strategy that gets old, and yet despite all of this, the deck is powerful, fun, and not that expensive depending on your build. So I hope very much this video has been of some help to you. You can help me out by remembering to like, share, subscribe, or just by leaving a message. Which commander would you like to see a tech on next? Let me know in the comments below.